Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Cooperative Network's e-learning webinar series. I'm Daniel Smith, President and CEO of Cooperative Network. And today we're going to continue a conversation we began in June discussing technology in the boardroom as a result of the impacts of COVID-19 on how we conduct our governance and our board activities within our cooperatives. We're very pleased today to have Dr. Michael Boland of the University of Minnesota with us, Bill Meshak of the Dairyland Power Cooperative, and Bob Murphy of Applewood Pointe of Roseville at Langton Lake to discuss how boards are adjusting and plan to adjust in the future as we continue to deal with the COVID-19 impacts on our business activities. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Boland. It is always an honor and a privilege to work with you, Dr. Boland. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Dan. Good morning, everyone. I think we're all learning with this technology. My cooperatives class this fall at the University of Minnesota. I'm teaching in person in the classroom, and then we're also broadcasting live at home, and then I'm also archiving everything. And I start each 75-minute lecture with a 15-minute speaker. Next week, I've got a young woman from Honduras who works for the cooperative down there, Cocoa Cooperative, who will be talking about how they've got no young members because everyone's immigrated. So we're doing different things at the university in terms of education. I think all of that's going to work out. And so this morning, we've got two directors who I'll allow Bill and Bob to do a self-introduction. And Bill, maybe I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we'll move to Bob, and then we'll pick up with their program.
Super, thank you. I am Bill Meshak with the Dairyland Power Cooperative. I am the manager of IT infrastructure services here at Dairyland. And I have been working with our board of directors since 2013. A bit about Dairyland. We are a generation and transmission cooperative based in La Crosse, Wisconsin. We provide basically wholesale power, electricity to our 24 member co-ops and 27 municipal utilities, ultimately serving a population of about 600,000 in rural portions of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois.
Thank you, Bill. Bob, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. My name is Bob Murphy. I'm a director and president of a senior cooperative housing organization. It's a little bit of a long name, Applewood Pointe Cooperative of Roseville at Langton Lake. Roseville is a first ring suburb of both Minneapolis and St. Paul. The upper Midwest, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin have the majority of senior cooperatives within the United States. Our building and organization is just a little bit larger than average in size. We have 89 units and approximately 140 people, members residing there. So it's really 89 is our member count. We've been in business since September of 2011. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. One of the reasons the topic for today of continuing the conversation was because some things came up in June with some cooperative program boards with regard to bylaws and cultural policies and allowing members to attend some of the board meetings and so forth. And so how do you deal with those issues when we've got something like this? So Bob, maybe I'll start with you. Would you like to talk to us a bit about how your board meetings worked before March and the governor's order in 2020, and then afterwards, and where you are right now with regard to how you're conducting your board meetings and what you've learned along the way?
Sure. Maybe I'll start out contrasting us with Dairyland. Our bylaws in most senior cooperatives since 2008 or 2009 in Minnesota require open board meetings in there, so any member can attend. Traditionally, most senior cooperatives have a large room called a great room, meeting room, and board meetings are held there with the directors at one end, and then the members that choose to attend are there. So we had been doing that January, February, and then COVID hit, and we had to figure out what to do. So pretty much beforehand, we'd publish the agenda several days ahead of time, Had a large screen TV, meeting room with good acoustics, several microphones in use at one time, so board members and any of our committee chairs could report. In a senior housing cooperative, a good deal of the work is done by committees there, and most also have a management company that provides a minimum of some type of housing or property manager and maintenance management there. So I think in March we tried a audio meeting service that our management company provided, and that didn't work very well for us. The board then explored two other services during work sessions we had with committees, and then finally settled on Zoom. And we had our annual meeting in April. I'll save that to the end, but basically, as you can imagine, with a median age of 81, our members perhaps were not the most tech savvy and tech comfortable in the world. So we ended up with Zoom because we thought there'd be a lot of mileage with being able to communicate with other organizations, church group, family members, and whatnot, and spent some time training our members and having some practice sessions with our board members. So in terms of actual board functioning, not too much has changed other than we're not face-to-face together. Members, it's not quite webinar format, it's more Zoom format, but can see the video as well as the audio, or just dial in with phone to listen in what goes on. And then board business is conducted, and all the members can see, and as well as minutes being taken. So it's more the technology end. We're not in the same room. We're not sitting at one table next to each other, but board packets are prepared ahead of time. The agenda is posted. None of that has changed. We had, as most groups, a little farbling with microphones, background noises, the grounds maintenance company choosing to mow the lawn and somebody having their patio door open. But that pretty much self-corrected after one or two meetings. I'd say we're from norming, storming, we're at the performing level right now.
Thank you, Bob. Bill, how's Dairyland been doing their board meetings?
So before March, we were all in-person board meetings. And like Bob mentioned, a lot of committee work does happen to prepare for those meetings. Those committees had been using a mix of phone bridges and some Skype for Business to help remote members who have travel conflicts or can't make to the headquarters, to help those folks be engaged in the meeting as well. When March hit, we actually took March off for our monthly meetings, and it started up in April with GoToMeeting. We were a bit lucky with our directors in that we've been using electronic board books on iPads for about 5 or 6 years now. So they already kind of have basic technology knowledge base to pull from. So we had just basically give them specific training on our meeting platform for GoToMeeting. We are a bit more limited in our attendance. Traditionally, it's been our directors from our member co-ops, business managers, and also Dairyland staff. We do require a non-disclosure agreement signed before you can attend our meetings, just as due to the confidential nature of the electrical industry and the business we conduct in those meetings. But yeah, it's been working out pretty well so far. There have been some hiccups as well. I mean, in one meeting we had a rooster in the background, which was nice to wake folks up with. But one of the bigger issues we've seen is actually internet speeds. Having 24 directors spread across 4 states, we see a wide variety of single digit up and download speeds to several hundred megabits per second. So there's a wide variety of connections out there, and we had to adapt, offer the phone option for folks who need to call in for a reliable audio connection. Some folks just can't run video because they don't have the bandwidth to do it. And then as we've gotten more comfortable over the summer, we've actually taken some of our board education sessions with external presenters into Zoom, just because of the feature disparity on various platforms, specifically the breakout room feature. We want to break our group into smaller groups so they can discuss a topic, come back with a few key points, and then GoToMeeting just doesn't have that feature. So we went to Zoom for a few months. And interestingly enough, our directors picked it up very quickly. There were a few bumps with GoToMeeting initially, but then when we switched to Zoom, it was a much quicker adoption rate. I don't know if it's just a repetition or practice, but it went pretty well for us.
We use Zoom at the University of Minnesota, and what I like about it is the breakout feature that you discussed. What I like is, I give each breakout room a task. Someone's got to be a reporter, someone's got to be a timekeeper, and then they've all got an agenda. But I can pop into each break room or each breakout room and then leave. And so, if I have got 12 breakout rooms, say they're doing a 10-minute thing, I can pop in and out of each one for 30 seconds or 45 seconds or something. So that's a really nice feature when you've got a lot of things or committee meetings, as you talked about there, Bill. So I've gotten to learn a whole bunch about Zoom from a teaching perspective. So Bill, let's go back to what has been some of the positive that Dairyland has found about this technology. You alluded to some of it, but have you, are you on every board meeting call then or video as the IT person, or they bring you in as needed, or how does that work now relative to where you were before in the board meetings?
So before in our in-person meetings, I'd be in the first, say, 15, 20 minutes of the board meeting to help our directors with any iPad questions they had or other technical issues that may crop up. With the switch to virtual, I've been dedicating myself to the whole meeting as a dedicated IT rep. And it's been, the first few meetings I was pretty busy, but then as we get into the groove and get into habit, the tasks have dropped off for me, so I can just kind of sit in the background, monitor what's going on, and jump in if needed. It does help us a lot because initially we had lots of folks who were going off mute to make a point, but then they'd forget to mute again. So when background noise would crop up, I could just quick do a scan, see who's highlighting for the noise, and then mute them administratively. Help keep the meeting moving and fewer distractions, questioning, okay, who's got the open mic? And so that went a lot smoother. Additionally, what we've been starting to do now, we've been having hybrid meetings the last couple of months as well. So about a portion of the group's on site, socially distanced with masks, and the other half is still at their house attending through their iPads. We've noticed that, I don't say impressive, but there's been a disconnect between the two groups. The folks who are on site are back to kind of their old patterns where they have their social breaks and they make their comments in the background. The folks who are remote can't quite hear those, so it kind of creates a what happened kind of different dynamic where you have to repeat stuff into a microphone so it makes sure it gets picked up to the remote side. But overall, it's like I said, they've adapted pretty well. It's been a major time savings for some of our directors who come from northern Wisconsin to southwest Wisconsin. Some of them have like a 4 or 5 hour drive one way. So they're saving quite a bit of drive time, hopefully being more productive at home and having more family time. The whole work-life balance for our directors.
There's a lot of deer on those highways, I think, too.
That too.
Bob, what about your board? So Bill talked a bit about this hybrid format before and after and what's going on now. What's happening for you right now in your boardroom?
The hybrid is how we did our annual meeting, and perhaps I can cover that a bit later. Bill brought up a good point on internet and broadband. We're fortunate we're spread out over one building, so we don't have the difference in service. We cut the cable in January of 15 and strung fiber into the building, and then Cat5 to all the units. So we have adequate bandwidth for any of our meetings. In keeping in Minnesota with the governor's orders of 10 or less inside, that's just about the upper limit of most of our committees. So committees have been able to meet in our great room and conduct their business being socially distant and masked in there. We have two of the larger committees that's a little bit tough for. We've been working outside on it. We haven't really done the combined present and remote. We haven't quite got the electronics down for that yet. But for the annual meeting through bylaws and whatnot, we had the secretary and myself in our meeting room and then a Zoom meeting, and we just declared the maximum capacity of the room to be 10. So the first 8 people that got there could have a seat, and then the rest had to participate via Zoom. And that's permitted by our bylaws. And for the annual meeting, this was before the governor's orders was issued, our bylaws allowed absentee voting for the members, and the main items of business were to elect 2 directors. So we just encouraged everyone to vote absentee beforehand, and then had the ballots counted at the meeting and the results reported there. So it's been people that aren't tech comfortable, it's been a little tough with them, but they've been able to make up for it through committee participation or just walking down the hall and talking with one of the directors when they see him. So that's the one of the big differences, I think, in a housing cooperative where each building is a separate corporation, and all of your neighbors are fellow members.
Bill, so both of you have alluded to the use of Zoom, and so Zoom creates a digital archive, a MP4 file, if you will. Previously, when you have a board meeting, you've got the secretary taking the notes, and that's the only record you have of the board meeting. Are you creating is there an archive being created right now, an MP4 file, or are you turning that feature off, or how are you handling that at Dairyland?
We are turning off the recording. Our secretary is still in there taking notes like she did before. Yeah, we're not recording the meetings just due to the whole potential legal ramifications that would bring us.
And Bob, how about how about at your housing cooperative?
Yeah, same as Bill. We have not implemented that feature to do recording, and for us, it doesn't. There isn't a value add argument for doing it, and there's a potential legal downside also of it. And we're very good at keeping minutes, but it seems like it might be more difficult to keep the Zoom recordings and keep those organized. So we haven't had a need to do that yet.
What I do with my speakers, I don't archive their presentations. Sometimes if you've got a speaker from a publicly traded company or any speaker in general, it's just, I archive my class lecture itself, but I don't do the speaker portion of it. What are some challenges going forward? So I've encouraged people, and including myself, this is the future that we've been talking for years about blending technology into more and more things that we do. I can't speak to the advocacy side, but certainly there's a lot of people saying now's the time to come to make sure that we've got broadband access to everybody in the United States. As you think about challenges going forward, how do you keep people, at some point, we'll be back to meeting in person, do you just give up the technology stuff? Do you keep some things blended in? What are the challenges going forward with technology? Do you think you'll still use some of it, or just go back to what you're doing before? And Bob, maybe I'll start with you in your boardroom there.
Yeah, I would say it's hard to let go entirely. That an advantage of this that we have a number of snowbirds or lake birds, depending on the season, And with a regular in-person meeting, I won't say disenfranchised, but where they're at prohibits them from attending and doing anything other than listening to the minutes. But our snowbirds and our lakebirds now are able to listen and even participate. So it's both an upside and downside if you view it from if you're on vacation. But I think that's a plus. Other environments, so I think it's true everybody's retired in the building now, but still active in community organizations, church groups, family doings, and I would see the technology that they use here also being useful there. Yeah, our annual meeting went well in that it may just be all virtual next year if the governor's order is still in effect. Being able to vote by mail was certainly a huge convenience for us that did away with some potential problems.
Bill, you alluded to your geography and some of the things with directors. What are your instincts about the board going forward with the use of technology versus doing what you're doing before in person, or any other challenges that you see going forward?
Yes, I would see us continuing with the technology as well. I know, like I said, with some of our directors traveling 4 or 5 hours in one direction, especially like wintertime, we're going to be setting up our boardroom for a combination hybrid meeting, so in person and virtual. So we'll have the technology there already. There's no point just to click the button and fire it up for folks who want to still stay remote. So if we have a blizzard or something, hey, that's great. We'll still conduct business just fine. We've learned a lot with meetings in general over the last 3-4 months. It's going to take a little longer. We have to take a few more breaks to make sure there's no questions. But overall, I mean, business is still getting done. And for the most part, I've not heard any complaints about the move to virtual. We are looking though to move one last time to Microsoft Teams for our meeting software, just to help reduce our costs and be responsible to our co-op members. That'll happen at the end of this year, ideally. But after that, I mean, we're still gonna have, I still see us running the same thing, with technology being in a much more prominent place in our boardroom and in our meetings.
One of the things I've observed is being a teacher, it's hard to juggle. You're trying to lecture, you're trying to monitor Zoom in my case for student questions. Even on a big video monitor, I maybe only see 54 headshots. So as you think about, if you look today, I've gone to the use of headphones and a microphone. To me, that works a lot with my microphone teaching and stuff. Are there any etiquette issues we've learned throughout all of this? And Bill, maybe I'll start with you just as the IT person. Are there some etiquette things, some things you've had to help as you observe the March, April, May, June, lessons that you've learned from a technology standpoint to help make the meetings better?
Yes, there's been a few lessons learned. One of the first things is to always start your meetings with the audience muted. Our directors, there's an interesting dynamic that happens with our meetings. Before the meetings, they'll all go off mute and have their old sidebars and the conversations they had back when they were still in person to kind of catch up. But then once that meeting starts, it's business as usual. But yeah, like I said, starting with mute, we don't require video, but it's grown organically in our co-op. I think folks just want to make that connection with each other again. So about half of our board will just willing to turn on their video if they can support it. Like I said, bandwidth issues sometimes limit that. Taking more time during presentation, pause for that 15-20 seconds. It's tough because it's an awkward silence, but our directors need that time to tap 3 or 4 times on their iPads to go off mute, make sure they're off mute, and then ask their question. And then as something else doing with the hybrid meetings is it helps to have somebody on site who's responsible for helping wrangle the group that's on site back into session. We'll take a 10, 15-minute break. They'll get tied up in the sidebar. The virtual group's sitting back down ready to go again, but this in-person group is still having that conversation. Helps to have somebody inside saying, hey, okay, it's time's up. Let's get back to business. Just helps keep the pace of the meeting moving, and it saves some annoyance for the virtual audience as well.
Bob, what about the role of chairman in all of this? So, it used to be you could look across the table, you see everybody, and now you've got to think about things like with the virtual technology, you've got the mute, you've got to keep track of, you can see people's hands before, and now voting and things. How has the role of chairman in your boardroom changed throughout this process?
I'll say a little bit more burdensome. I don't know if that's quite the right word. Besides just keeping the meeting running and following the agenda, the additional tasks of admitting people that come in late in there, displaying documents for folks, and keeping track of raised hands while documents are being shared, it gets to be I don't know, administrative burden. So we're exploring having like a technical assistant to monitor the weight room and keep track of raised hands. So it's just a little bit more. And then if you have any technical glitches on your end, or Zoom or your OS vendor graces you with an update the night before and you haven't had a chance to check it out, a little bit more burdensome, but not terrible. In terms of etiquette, the used to sit in the center and have to look over one shoulder than the other. And now you just look at who has their hands raised, and Zoom does an excellent job of first come moving up to the top of the list. So that's actually makes it easy then to know the order to call on people. And then another etiquette thing, if usually 2 or 3 people just dial in and don't have videos and have a phone number represented, and going through and having that person introduce themselves and changing the phone number to a name. Just about everybody knows everybody in the cooperative, so it can just get by like Bob M for myself. And, they know who that is, but that helps in there for those that join just by phone.
Yeah, and there's a way to put headshots up there too. Your IT person could, doesn't have to just say Bob M, but you could put a picture of them there too. I think that's helpful from an etiquette standpoint. I do a number of board evaluations in the summers. I've done several of those, and I've got one I'm doing right now for cooperative. And it's very apparent that some folks now with phone, if you will, they can be outside doing chores and put the phone on as opposed to going to actual boardroom and sitting down. And so other people are very more disciplined. I'm going to sit at my desk. I'm going to, just do things I did before. So there's been a little change. Some people say it's more efficient. Does it matter if I'm actually doing chores while I'm doing board business or not? And so I think we're going to learn some things going forward. But it's very clear people responded differently in terms of this. And I think that's got implications for how we do some things in the future. What about voting? So Bob, how is voting done now? Is it done, before you'd raise hands, there's no paper ballot, if you will. Some co-ops would use a paper ballot, but how do you do things by vote? Is it done in the chat room itself? Is it done by people just still using voice? How do you handle voting on things?
Yeah, so for the board voting on things, the vast majority is still by voice vote. So protocol is use a weight room with everybody muted, and then as the board members sign in, they're unmuted, and then when there's a motion, state the motion and listen. And occasionally, if can't tell things or it's a let's say significant issue, then there's a roll call vote. On issues that may be, I'll say, urgent but not derisive or controversial at all, our bylaws allow for written action by the whole board. So if all 5 directors are in favor, we can have a written action. and that's, we've turned something around in as little as 4 hours type of thing by having the action prepared and then just having directors sign it. But with the general membership muted, usually it's the property manager and the 5 directors are unmuted. It's quite straightforward to have a voice vote.
Have you delayed any major decisions because you're afraid you can't get good discussion through technology and you want to wait until you're back in person? Or is it the actions that the board has to undertake, nothing's changed since you've gone to technology, other than the fact that the March meeting was a little different?
I'll say the socialization or community engagement, a lot of things are talked about by the committee of whose charter it falls into. If we're, think we need to spend $6 grand on mulch in there, and that wasn't planned, then that comes through our building and grounds committee. They have a meeting on that, and the recommendation comes to the board. So I don't think it's, if anything, it's made committee meetings more important and be able to discuss issues thoroughly there.
Bill, your role now being in every board meeting at Dairyland, how are you able to help people in real time? So it's, you know, it's embarrassing if you're on a phone call and you're the director and you're trying to get your microphone to work right or trying to get your video to work right and so forth. And, you know, and if you're the guy that's got the lawnmower going in the background or something, you didn't want that to happen, right? So how are you able to help people learn technology and learn some of the etiquette issues without causing embarrassment or just discomfort with that? Are there things you're able to do to help directors in real time?
Yeah, so I've had several kind of last minute phone calls before board meetings with directors. I'm just going through quick troubleshooting tips and figuring out like why the video won't work or why they can't find the mute button, stuff like that. What really helped us though with the transition was before our first virtual board meeting, we said, okay, here's your meeting details, you know, invite and all that. I put out a separate email and a communication to our director saying, if you need help, here's my phone number, here's my cell phone, give me a call. You know, I can turn on the GoToMeeting at any time. So they had, you know, whenever it was convenient for them, they could call me. I'd say, okay, let's fire it up quick. I'd walk them through, okay, on board day, this would be just like this. So, you know, click on the link in this email. It'll take you into the, you know, step them through step by step. So they can do it in their own time, not rushed. But that really helped us out. I probably had half the board the first time. We just went through a quick, you know, 5-minute call. Hey, show me the interface quick. Here's your key points. You know, here's your mute. Here's your chat. That really helped us out a lot. But yeah, there's still been a few times it's a quick cell phone call to their cell phone saying, okay, quick, let's talk through this. What do you see? But overall, yeah, it's been pretty, not a lot once we got going after the first month.
Do you think, so I've got a brother-in-law who's in IT, and one of the things he's made the point is he and I have talked about this, and I've got another brother who's CEO of his cooperative. They've now made it, if you're on the board, they're going to get you a direct Ethernet line. You won't be dependent upon Wi-Fi in your house. So there's going to be some things with their board where they're going, I won't say create a studio in the director's home, but they're just going to do some things, the headsets, the direct line as opposed to a Wi-Fi line, just because they think if you're on the board, you need to have those things to make communication better. Are there things like that, Bill, that you've thought about that's going forward, that how you might change what the board could do for a director with some of those technology things?
To some extent, but not to that level. You know, we've offered a couple tips, you know, how to set up at home, how to best utilize what you have for an internet connection. Unfortunately, some of our directors are just in such a rural spot that the best they can get is a single, you know, a few megabit internet connection. In those cases, we've encouraged them to drive their home co-op if they can, their, you know, office building where they have a higher speed connection. It's not necessarily just the wireless, it's just overall the service they can get is not up to par, and so they're kind of pointing out the discrepancy. No one's been there for a while, but never really quantified. Rural broadband is just lacking in general, so it's kind of help pushing a couple different issues in our co-op territory as well.
Bob, do you think that the technology you alluded to your annual meeting, and maybe you want to come back to that again. How did that work, or did it not work? What would you change differently with regard to the annual meeting and the use of technology?
Yeah, good question. What really made it work for us was the day before the secretary, housing property manager, and I went in the meeting room and actually had a dry run like Bill did with his. And we learned about the feedback issues and got headsets for us to speak. So the people in the room on the meeting day could just hear us normally talking. But because we had earphones and headsets on, we weren't getting any background, and were able to effectively have a hybrid meeting with a handful of people in the meeting room and the rest being part of a video conference. So I think a dry run with the participants, even though our meeting room won't change, some of our computers or headsets may have, that strongly recommend a dry run in the actual meeting room shortly beforehand to make sure everything's working.
I've got one last question for Bob, but if there's anybody out there that's got a question, maybe you can start preparing those, or work with Michael to ask that question or put in the chat room. Bob, what about the boardroom dynamics? So I speak Spanish, but I'm not fluent in Spanish. And what that means is I hear a Spanish speaker, I translate English in my head, I retranslate in my head, comes up with a Spanish how to respond. That whole process takes 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds. And that's why typically when you engage with someone who's a non-native English speaker, or someone whose English is a second language, why there's always a little hiccup in the conversation, because that's the way our brain functions. It's very rare for me to actually think in Spanish. So as I think about technology, the same thing's going on. There's always a little lag versus in person when you've got technology, and that lag can be magnified because of the bandwidth, because of the efficiency in the techno system, and then just the process of unmuting and trying to talk about things. And you alluded to the fact that a pause, Bob, it doesn't seem that long to everyone else, but it seems eternity to the person who's pausing. And so the importance of counting to 3,000 or 5,000. Can you talk a bit about that process in the boardroom? Do you have the same people who are maybe a little more vocal in person? Are they as vocal online, or have you seen dynamics between the board, the members? Is the dynamics still the same because of technology, or has that changed a bit?
Well, our board is small compared to Bill's. For example, we're 5 people. The board book topics are known ahead of time, and directors have had a chance to do their own research. So it's usually, we've had very little dissent. Most of our votes are unanimous, and ones that are, people are free to speak up. The wait to unmute yourself, or how long do I wait before I say, Mike, you're on mute, you know, to the person in there. Other than those, I haven't observed a change, probably because the board is small and used to working together. If I just take an example, I also represent the housing sector on Cooperative Networks board, and those dynamics are much different because it's a much larger group of directors.
Michael, are there any questions out there? I think this is a good, we've gone about 40 minutes here, and I know that the Zoom modules can be long, but do we have any questions from folks?
I'm not seeing any questions right now. We can wait a couple more minutes to see if any other questions come in, but if not, we can end the webinar after we wait about a minute here if there are no questions.
Okay. Maybe I'll just ask Bill a last question then as we wait to see if there's any questions. Bill, what about the future? Do you think, you know, my brother-in-law who's been in IT, he's increasingly, his job has gotten more valuable, the software updates, and so forth. What about as you think about your job security and things you're working with? Will you do some things different in your boardroom now? You've discussed going to Microsoft product. A number of co-ops I know have done that. I'm not promoting technology here on this call, but what are some things from a technology standpoint that you think investments you'll be making in the next year to help Dairy Gold's board have its highest potential?
So yeah, we're investing in a lot of looking at how we can retrofit conference rooms to be more video friendly and virtual meeting friendly. Traditionally, we've had just a speakerphone and a basic computer. So we're looking at how we can enhance those options. But we are limited to capacity as well in those because of social distancing concerns. So it's not just that, but it's also across all our workstations as well. Like, how can we help employees be productive, but yet limit those disruptions for other neighboring employees? With an open format office, it's a little tougher, but it's a challenge we're embracing because that's where we're going. So, and as far as the board goes, the same kind of concerns, you know, how do we help them be productive, yet make it simple enough that it's not going to cause issues down the road.
One of the things we're doing with our classrooms is they've got these poly products. Again, I'm not promoting a company, that's just what we're working with, but trying to bury microphones in the ceiling. So if you've got a board, you've got 3 people at home and say a bigger board, say you got 15, for example, in the room, the 3 people at home can hear each other because those microphones in there. Trackable webcams, again, that's not something that the board chairman tends to stay at the table, but if you've got members of management doing a presentation at the board that might be doing a PowerPoint, might have to stand up by it, right. There's ways we could do some things. As long as you've got some experience to practice it, there's ways now you can see presentations at home just like you were in the boardroom. And so I think there's some technologies coming out when we think about management presentations to the board and how the people who may be at home receiving those presentations, how that might come out. So I'm excited about the future. We're learning. Some of those supplies are in short demand or short supply right now because everybody wants them. But I think we're going to see some more things at home to make things more seamless. And, you know, maybe that director who's making a monthly drive of 4.5 or 5 hours might do that 6 times a year or 4 times a year, and then maybe do 4 meetings in person and 4 from at home. I think we'll see some changes like that. That'll help. Michael, do you see any questions or anything, or?
Yes, there is one question here about from an anonymous attendee. How have your security had to change with the expanded use of this technology?
Great question, because Zoom's got some changes coming up here in a month or so. Bill, let's start with you, and then we'll come back to Bob.
Yeah. So, how has our security changed? It hasn't changed drastically, thankfully. We've always been kind of cautious with how we approach it. Knowing that devices do get lost, so how do we secure those? We were initially hesitant to use Zoom because of the security issues they had earlier this year. We worked, did some additional research, dug into it, and got the answers we need to feel comfortable with it to actually use it for our business with the board. Overall, yeah, we keep an eye on it, make sure like we're staying up to date on our software patches. And we're also very restrictive on what hardware we purchase. As Dr. Boland mentioned, webcams especially are hard to come by right now. But if you go on Amazon, you can find a whole bunch of various no-name brands. We made the decision early on, we're going to stick with name brands that we know and that we can vet that are not going to be
USA
security risk, right? Or at least with USA companies. So
right, yeah, right.
Specifically, not endorsing a specific product, but like Logitech or Avaya for webcams that we need in a hurry.
Bob, how has the board been informed about security issues by management?
Repeat the question. I want to make sure I understand it.
So my guess is the board, as a director, you're not that familiar with security. You just assume that you pass that to management to do. But my guess is management's been your CEO and staff have been even more informative with you about security issues. What types of information have you received from management on security topics linked with technology during this time period?
Yeah, the management company is part of a larger organization, so we get updates from them. But like Bill, we've kept track of Zoom changes. We've always had waiting room enabled and feel pretty comfortable that way. That we're a little bit different in that I retired out from the IT industry as a consultant after being a manager and project manager, and our treasurer has a PhD in computer science also. It hasn't been retired that long. So we've managed to keep up on things internally on our own, but realize not every organization can do that. Again, not having the meetings recorded, the using software as a service model for some of our service providers, so we're not dependent on having to constantly keep any servers on campus up to date.
Mike Keller, are there any other questions?
I do not see any at this time.
Well, I'll make a few comments and I'll turn it over to Dan, unless a question comes in. But I'm excited about this technology. You know, I've got 15 years left of teaching. I think if my health is good and I choose to, I think that, for example, right now, as a student, we're giving students more choices. So I've got my lecture is closed captions. So now they can grab a script of my lecture if they don't want to listen to me. They can watch me, they can archive it like a podcast type thing. And then they can attend live. So we're pushing a blending of technology and things in ways at a university that you're not going to use in your boardroom. I understand that. But I do think we're going to see more blending across society of this. If you have a chance, if there's any directors on the call, there's some really good future of work type thought pieces out there and podcasts, futurists thinking about this. I'm hoping to hear some of those folks that hopefully, you know, when we get back in person, we'll have some of those type speakers on programs. But I think it's a very interesting time. And I do think from the advocacy side, maybe we're going to get some things done on broadband that we couldn't get done before. It's a big push, but I know that folks here in the Midwest have been leading on that. And I think that's an idea whose time has come if we find a way to fund it. One last thing, it's University of Minnesota, we do director orientation programs, and we're hoping to do something in person in January this year with Cooperative Network. But we're also developing, across 13 universities, we're developing a new director orientation, basically a director 101. And I said the mission of that program is to help a director feel less stupid the first day in the boardroom. So we've got 23 modules we're putting together. We've got actors hired to play out some vignettes and thought pieces. We've got short 15-minute programs using different technologies. And so you'll be hearing and reading more about that come November. We still think we can launch this in November and work with the state councils on that. And so Courtney Berner over at the University of Wisconsin is someone I'm collaborating with on this. Frayne Olson up at North Dakota State, Matt Elliott at South Dakota State, Kerry Jacobs at Iowa State, and a number of other universities. So we're excited about that. We think we've got a teaching tool that will help for new directors and a self-paced, and then we're going to follow up with monthly, for lack of a better word, open office hours, a Zoom type thing where directors who are participating in the program can meet the faculty and go through some of their workbook ideas. So you'll be hearing and reading more about that. Dan, I'm going to turn this back over to you to do a close and make any announcements and talk about what's coming up if you want.
Sure, thank you. And thank you to all our panelists for a great discussion today. Very informative, very timely. And thank you for everyone for attending. These webinars are e-learning series that Mike Cal directs has really been a great occurrence for us over this period of struggling to adapt to the new realities that we're all dealing with. So please continue to visit our website to be aware of upcoming webinars. We actually have another one today at 2 o'clock this afternoon that is called Building Trust in Crisis and Recovery. We're hosting that in conjunction with FCC Services. So please, there's still time if you want to visit our website on that. And then we will keep you informed on future webinars as we continue to help each other cooperatively work through the situation that we're all dealing with. Until we meet again, please everyone stay safe, stay well, stay in touch. Thank you.